sister moved to Israel around the time that I was starting college. And as it became clear to me that it was for the long term, I was resigned to living an ocean away from her. So how lucky I was, and I will add also how lucky my children were, when my sister moved to North Carolina 11 years ago, and how lucky we are to get to live just a few blocks away from her. And how incredibly lucky I am that I also get to work with her at Elon, where she began working some years ago as Assistant Director of Jewish Life, and where she took on the role of Interim Assistant Dean of Multi-Faith Engagement this summer. And how lucky we all are that she has been a force on this campus, touching the lives of so many, bringing so much transformational energy and light and love and color to students and faculty and staff. And how lucky we all are to have her here, and how lucky we all are to be with her this morning. So it's my very good fortune to get to welcome my sister to this podium, Assistant Dean Hillary Zaken.
Hi, good morning. I'm Hillary, or as many of you know me, Hillary from the emails. Like many people who stand at this podium, I've spent most of my time at Elon saying no to speaking at Newman Lumen. I'm more comfortable telling other people's stories than sharing my own. I prefer my words in print rather than out loud. I think a lot about the words I use to describe myself. Colorful, imperfect, pragmatic, creative, strategic, decisive, loyal, messy, talkative, resilient, mother, woman, friend, colleague, wife, daughter, sister, Jewish, agnostic, Israeli, American, cook, storyteller, photographer, crafter, human. None of these words equal up to the sum of my parts, and nothing I say here today will be more than a window into how I see myself. But it's a window that I'm opening and inviting you all in. What are the words that make me who I am? A number of years ago, I developed a personal mission statement which continues to resonate. I live life in full color, and I want to inspire and empower others to do the same. But what does that mean? Conveniently, I had the opportunity to talk about it recently with the local press, so I had a rehearsal for today. January was Cervical Cancer Awareness Month, and as many of you know, I had cancer. I really didn't want to talk to the press because, like I said, I'm better in print. But I agreed anyway, because as I thought to myself, if one woman hears my story and goes to her doctor, I will potentially have saved a life. Because you see, that's what matters to me. There's a famous line in the Talmud, whoever saves a single life saves the whole world. And I really believe that each one of us is an entire world. I believe in the power of the single interaction, the single story, how a smile or a kind word can make you feel. Small acts have a ripple effect. Small acts change the world. But I digress. Back on topic, life in full color. What does that mean? It's about taking chances and walking through doors that are open, as my mother taught me. And sometimes it's opening up closed doors just to see what might lie inside. And it's also about walking through a door and being like, no, not this door, not this room, sorry. And turning around and walking right back out. So living life in full color is about saying yes, but it's also about saying no. It's about vibrant messiness, about intentional imperfection, about not being able to choose a favorite color because I love them all, even though I am partial to purple. And truly, I don't have a favorite anything. I'm all about the ands. Sure, I have a distinct fondness for spider red print clothing, shoes by John Fluvog, and music by Tom Waits, but I don't like to limit myself. That's what full color means to me. It's about not being afraid to stand out because of my choices, my clothing, my hair, and my shoes, but also the things I say, my inability to mask or hide my feelings and thoughts, the way I show up, and how I insist on always being myself so others are comfortable being themselves around me. Life in full color is about acknowledging that life is not linear and not everything goes according to plan. It's about making mistakes and being okay with that. It's not about not having regrets about words said, paths not chosen, or choices made. It's about comfort with making decisions. It's about not only knowing how things will go, but taking chances anyway. It's about knowing you can't control everything, like getting cancer, but you can control your reactions to things and how you act on them. You see, nothing is perfect, and it never will be, and I like it that way, messy and glorious and colorful. So me and my own words. Well, that comes back where I started. I'm so much more comfortable telling other people's stories. I even made a career out of it, so it feels ironic I don't know how to tell my own. See, by the time you're middle-aged like me, when you start thinking back about your memories, things are a little bit foggy. But some memories stand out clearly, boldly, like color images in a black and white slideshow. So those are the stories that I'll share. When I was a little girl, my favorite game was, unsurprisingly, dress up, especially in my grandmother's closet. She had such a fabulous variety of stylish clothes that she'd worn out to cocktail parties, family smachot, and dinner gatherings. I would put on her high heels and her chiffon and velvet dresses, and I'd feel so happy. My grandmother was my fashion icon, my inspiration, and the person I always wanted to please. I started wearing her vintage clothing and her jewelry when I was in high school, and I still wear them today. It's a way of keeping her with me always. I've always had a love for vintage clothing and hats and jewelry, not just because of the aesthetics, but because of the stories they carry. These dresses, these earrings, they've lived a life. They've been places. People have loved them and valued them, and by the time they come to me, they have the power of the story infused in them. This is also why I have 40 vintage hats hanging in my hallway. So stories are not just for people or things, they're for places as well. We traveled to Israel a lot when I was a child, and every time we went to Israel, I would claim I forgot what our house looked like, because Israel felt like home. If I breathe deep right now, I can even conjure up the smell of sun on ancient rock, a smell that continues to enchant me. I can be transported in a second to the stone courtyard with the large mulberry tree outside my aunt and uncle's house in the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. I can smell the smells that accompanied me on the walk to their house, which was in an old Crusader tavern with a lingering musty smell of antiquity that no cleaning products could remove. For most of my life, I was sure I was going to make Aliyah or move to Israel. It was a dream that carried me. It was my guiding compass. And when I graduated from college, that's what I did. I moved to Jerusalem, and I was pretty sure I was not coming back. But as the famous saying goes, humans make plans, God laughs. I lived in Israel for 14 years, but what happened to me there wasn't what I had planned. So here's another story. In 2001, I was in the middle of my master's degree in Bible studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and I was researching ancient war, specifically the wars that Joshua waged to claim the land of Israel. I was pretty sure I was going to be an academic. But the world around me had just exploded. In the fall of 2000, the Second Intifada broke out, and by the end of 2001, suicide bombings were commonplace. I will never forget those early days of living under the shadow of war, of being uncertain about whether it was safe to go out, to go to a coffee shop, to go to a pizzeria, to get on a bus, listening to the radio news every hour for updates. And at the same time, I was frustrated with how the story of people's experiences were being told. So one day, in typical Hillary fashion, I decided I was going to do something about it. It seemed foolish to me to be stuck in the library, researching ancient war when there was an actual war happening outside. So I decided to write a letter to the Jerusalem Bureau of the Washington Post telling them they should hire me. Now, I know this is not typically how things work, but I decided to take the chance anyway. And as it turned out, I did get the call for a job interview. A week later, I had my first chance to be a journalist. I got a call from the new Washington Post bureau chief that there had been a suicide bombing on a bus, and she wanted me to come and translate at the bus driver's funeral. Speak about trial by fire. I will never forget that experience. Not only it was the first time I had ever reported on anything, it was the first time I'd been to a funeral of a victim of a terror attack. I will never forget the story of Rachamim Tzidkiyahu, who died, as he lived, with his hands on the wheel, when a suicide bomber boarded his bus at the Pop Junction in Jerusalem. That funeral was filled with the sounds of grief, the smells of sweat and tears. I remember standing at the back of the crowd, next to a particularly prickly bush, whispering rush translations of eulogies. It was the beginning of a career I had never imagined for myself, but it made me who I am. That job sparked my passion for storytelling. It taught me the importance of asking the right questions and the value of compassionate listening. I wasn't the person who went to talk to the military or the police. I was the reporter who went to the hospital after the suicide bombings to talk to the families and the victims. I was the person who went to the preschool that was struck by a missile. I was the reporter who stopped random people on the street to ask them how they were feeling and their thoughts on politics, culture, religion, and war. It was through this work that I learned to talk to strangers and be the kind of person that people can confide in. Living in Israel during those years changed me. I, like every other Israeli I knew, lost friends and family. There was a car bomb on the street below one of my apartments in the Mahne Yehuda neighborhood, and when I came home from work, there was shrapnel and body parts on my balcony. I wrote an email to my mother that she will never forget, titled, "The Bomb on My Doorstep." When living in another apartment, also downtown, I looked out my window and, to my horror, watched a bus blow up in front of my eyes. I watched it drive through an intersection, and suddenly there was an unimaginably large boom, and the bus was engulfed by a fireball, and it drifted to a stop directly across the street from my apartment, billowing black smoke. There was a moment of total silence, and then the sirens started. I watched 16 people die, and more than 50 get hurt from my living room. What did I do? I ran downstairs and I took pictures and I talked to the survivors beside the smoking, bombed-out bus frame, and I submitted my reporting. And when I had sent in all the stories, I went home and I cried. And then I moved to a new apartment, not downtown. So here's another story again about doing. When I was pregnant with my younger son, Abir, I was considering leaving my ex-husband for the third or fourth or fifth time. In those difficult final years of my first marriage, I felt constrained in a beige box, like my life was devoid of color. So I went to a therapist to help me talk through it. She asked me one question that still sticks with me. Let's say, she asked me, you were at home alone. You needed to go pick up your son, and your keys fell behind a huge piece of furniture, a wall unit weighing a few hundred pounds. What would you do? I would move it, I said. You wouldn't ask for help, she inquired. No, I said, why would I ask for help? I mean, if I needed to move it, I would move it. Through that exchange, I realized that my comfort lies in action. That's how I solve problems, by doing things. And I realized that once I decide I want to do something, there's no walking it back. I did leave my ex-husband. I escaped from my difficult and abusive marriage, and I reclaimed living in color. We were in divorce court in May 2012. I got my get, or my Jewish divorce, on June 13th, and as my brother said, by July 31st, 2012, I was living in Greensboro. I left a lot behind: a beloved career, a network of friends, a house with a garden with pomegranate and loquat trees, my favorite city in the world. But I had full custody of my 2 sons and the freedom to build a new life. So why Greensboro? Because of that wonderful human who introduced me. You see, I'd lived across the ocean from my immediate family for 14 years, and I decided that if I was going to leave the city of my dreams, at least I should go to where my family lives. Family is one of my highest values. So when I got married in the summer of 2021, just a month after the surgery to remove the cancer from my body, it was in my happy place, the beach at sunset, with my immediate family present and my brother performing the ceremony. A lot of people ask how I ended up in this job. As it turns out, as you've already heard, my brother is the reason I'm here at Elon. But aside from that, coming to this role has been full circle. I studied religion and Jewish studies in college, so for religion majors, there is hope of a career. My meandering path took me through jobs as a teacher, as a journalist, as a bar owner, as a nonprofit professional, as a Jewish communal professional, and now here. And this job just feels right. Because I've always been fascinated by belief, by the big whys, and I have a lot of strong beliefs of my own. Sure, they might have to do more with equity and justice than God, but I really envision a world where everybody and their diverse identities and stories and beliefs can coexist in a beautiful rainbow. Just a few days ago, as I walked into this building, a student stopped me and said, "I'm always so happy to see you. You bring light and color into every room." What a color. Light and color. That reminds me of what I see when I'm driving at night. You see, I have astigmatism, and in the dark, around every streetlight and every set of car headlights, I see a blurry rainbow halo. And that's kind of how I think of myself. A blurry rainbow halo. Messy and imperfect and colorful. So So thank you for being here with me today in this space and listening to my story about choices, about closing and opening doors, and a few moments that made me. And I invite each of you to join me and live life in full color and be authentically, unapologetically yourselves.